April 24, 2008. Carmel Valley, San Diego, one of the wealthiest zip codes in Southern California. A woman in a sweatsuit steps out of a black Lexus SUV outside her home. Federal marshals are waiting. They handcuff her in front of her own daughter. Her name, as far as anyone in this neighborhood knew, was Marie Walsh, wife of a financial executive, mother of 3, 23 years married to the same man. But Marie Walsh didn't exist. Not really. Not until 1976, when a 19-year-old named Susan LeFevre climbed a barbed wire fence at a Michigan prison and disappeared. For the next 32 years, she raised a family, built a marriage, and lived 4 blocks from her own quiet secret. Her husband didn't know. Her children didn't know. She had a scar on her hand that none of them ever asked about. Then one anonymous phone call ended it. How does a fugitive vanish for 3 decades in plain sight? And what finally gave her away? Rewind to 1974. Susan LeFevre is 19 years old in Saginaw County, Michigan. She's arrested and pleads guilty to a heroin charge, what she later describes as a low-level recreational drug deal, not trafficking. She expects a short sentence. Instead, the judge hands down 10 to 20 years. LeFevre would later say she didn't know the court had an unofficial policy at the time: sentence every heroin offender the same, regardless of the details of the case. 14 months into that sentence, at the Detroit House of Correction, she says other inmates started threatening her. One night, she decided she couldn't stay. Here's the part that makes this story different from almost every prison escape you've heard of. It wasn't a solo job. It wasn't months of tunneling or lockpicking. It was a getaway car. LeFevre's grandfather and another relative agreed to meet her outside the prison. In February 1976, she walked across an open yard, threw her jacket over a barbed wire fence, and climbed. Search helicopters were already in the air by the time she reached the car. Her relative, she'd later say, was sitting there saying a rosary. She later described the moment like this: "You don't think about fear, you don't have time, you just run." Her grandfather drove her to his home in New Baltimore, Michigan, while a helicopter searched the area. Her mother gave her a few $100s. She said goodbye to her family, and within weeks, friends drove her to California. In her own words, written years later in her memoir, Somewhere Between the Cornfields of the Midwest and the Western Rockies, Susan LeFevre stopped existing. In California, she took her middle name, Marie, and a new last name. She worked odd jobs, stayed invisible. In her own telling, she went from a college student on the wrong path to something else entirely: a fugitive who knew exactly what she was. She got engaged once, told her fiancé the truth. He broke it off. She met Alan Walsh. This time she didn't tell him. Not before the wedding, not in the 23 years that followed. They raised 3 children together in one of San Diego's most affluent neighborhoods. By every visible measure, Marie Walsh had built an ordinary, comfortable American life. She wasn't hiding in the shadows. She was hiding in plain sight. Carpool lines, PTA meetings, a black Lexus in the driveway. After 32 years, that's how long the lie held. Then, in April 2008, an anonymous tip reached Michigan authorities. Someone, to this day, still unnamed, knew who Marie Walsh really was and made a call. Investigators matched fingerprints to California driver's license records. The match was exact. Federal marshals showed up outside her Carmel Valley home and arrested her in front of her youngest daughter. Her husband of over 2 decades found out his wife's entire identity was a fabrication, in the same moment the rest of the world did. She'd later tell reporters they thought they knew the world and knew their lives, and then all of a sudden their lives kind of exploded. Here's the twist this story delivers that most fugitive stories can't. LeFevre didn't fight extradition, and she didn't ask for leniency by pretending the escape never happened. She went back to Michigan and faced it. In September 2008, she pleaded guilty to the escape charge. A judge sentenced her to probation, 2 years common for a crime committed 32 years earlier. Michigan's parole board reviewed her original drug conviction too. Their finding, in 3 decades as a fugitive, she'd committed no new crimes. She'd raised a family, held a life together. The board's chairman put it simply: this is exactly the kind of life they want former prisoners to live. In January 2009, the board voted to release her. She walked out of Huron Valley Correctional Facility that May, back into her husband's arms, thanking her family for standing by her through what she called a very tragic, hard place. Susan LeFevre spent less time as a fugitive being chased than she did as a free woman nobody was looking for. Her escape wasn't the dramatic part of her story. The 32 years afterward were. She later wrote a memoir about it. A teenager who took one wrong path, escaped it for a while, built a life against impossible odds, and had it taken from her in a single knock at the door. The scar on her hand from that barbed wire fence never faded. Neither, she said, did the fear that someday, somehow, someone would remember her real name. Someone finally did.